Hello, my name's Olurotimi Osha. I'm continuing with the second part of my discussion on uh, going to law school in America. Uh, I'm very fortunate that I did graduate from law school in America. I got my Juris Doctor, or it's also called Doctor of Law degree from George Washington University Law School in Washington, D.C. And I went much later on after I already garnered several university degrees, including an MBA. But law was what I knew I always wanted to do since my childhood. It's interesting because my name, Olurotimi, right? So Rotimi, I'd be called Rotimi in Nigeria, right? I'd be called Rotimi. Nobody would call me Olu, right? Because we're all Olu in my family. But in any event, I sort of was named after the leading um, lawyer in Nigeria, the most famous lawyer in Nigeria, named Rotimi Williams, right? Rotimi Williams. He was the first senior advocate of Nigeria. Of course, Nigeria has a different jurisdiction. We came out of the British common law system, but I can have that discussion for another time. So, senior advocate in Nigeria, of Nigeria, if you hear that in America, that just goes over your head. So, that's like obtaining silk in UK. That also goes over American lawyers, or American attorneys' heads as well. I could do a further clarifying video on the elite status, right? The hierarchy of legal practitioners in Nigeria and in the UK. But in any event, since I was a kid, I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. But of course, I got all these degrees in so many different things, right? Because I have interest in a number of things. I love history, so I got a degree in history. Um, my dad thought I should get a degree in business, thought I was business minded, so I got an MBA and I got an accounting degree. But the goal was always to have a law degree, to be a lawyer. And this it didn't happen though for me until much later because I went through there was a period of vicissitudes that I struggled with, and my parents convinced me, persuaded me that look, I shouldn't give up my dream of becoming a lawyer, and so I did pursue that dream, and I'm very glad that I became a lawyer. So I'm doing this video to help some of my friends, the people that I know who are going to law school now, but much later on in life. In fact, one of them is a millionaire, has a successful businesses, has had a successful career, and but it was just always his life dream. I remember he asked me when I was in law school, enrolled in law school over a decade ago. About a decade ago, when I was enrolled in law school, and he would tell me that his dream was to go to law school one day as well. Now he's working on it. Of course, I did an earlier video discussing the LSAT, going through the process of applying to law school. In the United States, everybody has to take the LSAT, right? So the law school admissions test. And what's funny is that these different exams, right? These uniform exams that people have to take in America, it just creates an industry, right? A money-making scheme. So there's LSAT market, and I'm going to discuss, law school, and after you graduate, then you prepare for the bar, and then there's a bar, bar prep market as well, which is a huge industry, very expensive. Personally, I think the bar exam shouldn't, law school students shouldn't wait until they graduate to take the bar exam, which just makes it more expensive for them. It costs about $10,000 to prepare, to have funds available to register and prepare for the bar exam, and 3 months of your life, right? Students are indigent by the time you complete law school, which I've done an earlier video explaining how law school costs typically from 200 to over $500,000, depending on the school you go to. That's apart from the cost of your undergraduate, right? The cost of your undergraduate is separate, so it costs a lot of money. People who graduate from law school are broke, right? They become broke, and then they have to cough up another $10,000, and then 3 months of their lives, right, to prepare for the bar exam. I think that just is another racket. It's just another the bar prep. market is just another racket to extort and exploit law students. It makes sense that law students should take the bar exam while they're students, right? While they're enrolled in law school, just like medical doctors do. Medical students take the licensing examinations, right? Medical licensing examinations while they're students, right? I think to both parts, and then they go through the registration, medical licensing process after they graduate. But all the exams, the boards, they take them while they're students, right? While they're students, and it makes sense for law schools students to also take the bar exam while they're students, right? Because the first year, the bar exam test the first year of law school, what you do in your first year of law school. So in any event, so you get into law school, right? And depends on the type of law school. In my law school, we had Inns of Court because the George Washington University sort of venerates England and likes to channel all things British, right? So we have Inns of Court. Of course, I got a chance to go to Oxford University because I was, at George Washington University. So GW channels England a lot. So we have Inns of Court. You're going to be registered in an inn, just like they do in the UK, right? I'm going to do a video discuss the British two-tier legal practitioner path, right? Solicitors and barristers. So let me not digress. So in the United States, your first year in law school. Law school's 3 years, 3 years of full-time study. That's majority of law schools. Very few law schools offer a part-time program, especially in a metropolis like DC. It's very few, in New York, right? Most schools, in the big cities where people are busy workers, right? So government officials, cops, they tend to want to attend part-time, right? If they have a serious job. But most schools, majority of law schools are full-time in the United States. And it takes 3 years, right? It's 3 years of law school. That's after you have an undergraduate degree. But in my class and in several other instances, there are people who there's a former professor of chemistry who was in my class, right? There are medical doctors, people who have already obtained the medical degree, and they decide to go to law school, right? So lots of people have different graduate programs. I had an MBA, right, before going to law school. I'd been a stockbroker, financial advisor before I decided to go, to go back to law school. So, so there are many smart people, right, in law school, but you're all learning something that you've never learned before. So you're doing case law, and that's what you hear people say, judge-made law. So you see the Supreme Court cases that just came out, like Blanche versus Lau concerning immigration, right? And Trump versus Barbara concerning birthright citizenship. So that's what you study, but of course not the immediate ones that you just received. Sometimes it depends on the course you take, but not in your first year. In your first year, you take the fundamental courses, right? The courses you take in the first year. So those cases are normally historical cases. They're cornerstone. They're the canons of legal education, right? And so you're studying those cases, and of course you're learning how to think. So by studying case law, right? Case law, that's what we call it, or judge-made law. You're studying the opinions, the legal history. Typically, a case is broken into a holding, right? And there are facts, right? There's facts, the facts of the case, the ruling or the holding, right? That's the decision of the judge. And then the facts of the case, that's background, right? And then there's, I think that's basically it, right? That's basically it. And then, they could give the argument, right? They could give the argument to the body. But typically there's a holding, there are facts, the holding or the ruling, right? That's a decision of the judge. So when a law goes to the Supreme Court, there's a rule that comes out, right? There's a certain rule that the Supreme Court argue and then provide, right? It becomes a rule for other courts to follow, and that's stare decisis. I did a video talking about stare decisis. That's standing by prior decisions, right? Standing by, prior decisions, or, let prior decisions stand, or, something. Stare decisis, that's it, right? So precedent, right? That's the doctrine of precedent. So in your first year, all law schools teach the same thing in the first year of law school. And it's those courses that you get to take on the bar exam, right? Everybody takes that on the bar exam. Each state administers its bar exam, so it's called the multi-state bar exam, I think. Each state administers its own exam, right? But it's based on these standard courses that you take in your first year. And the panoply of courses, that's they teach civil procedure. There's civil procedure. There's constitutional law. There's criminal law, criminal procedure. There's evidence. There's contracts. There's property. There's torts, right? I think that's about it, right? So those are the courses that you take in your first year, and basically all law schools teach that in the first year of law school. They're the fundamentals, right, of lawyering. But later on, you can take whatever you want. They're typically more advanced courses in your second or third year, because after your first year, you've gotten an idea of what you're doing, right? You're reading cases, and it's a lot of reading, right? It's loads of reading. Hundreds of pages each day, right? Because you're going to go through the Socratic method, through which professors are going to pick. Your professor is going to pick on one person, and it's impromptu. You don't know who it is. He knows who it is, but the rest of you don't know. And you prepare a case, and then he's just basically asking you. He's drilling you the Socratic method. You should learn it. Go and read The Republic, Plato. I'm going to discuss it one day. The Republic, written by Plato. So they're discussing in like a Socratic method. By the way, if you're interested in law school, watch The Paper Chase. I watched it before I went to law school. Paper Chase. Watch these legal films. Watch A Few Good Men. My best, legal drama. So it gets you in the mindset. I've always loved court movies, where you think. So you learn how to reason, right? So you're really learning. It's not we don't memorize cases or statutes or codes in American law, but it's how you think like a lawyer, right? So there are rules, fundamental rules that you live by, and then you learn how to apply those. Everything has to fit into those fundamental rules. Your reasoning, right? The Constitution. What are your rights? What is fundamental? If that's within constitutional law. So again, law school's fun. I enjoyed it, right? I still enjoy, the thinking, the way lawyers think. I enjoy the reasoning. It's a lot of fun. Of course, many lawyers don't enjoy their work though, because it's a lot of work, right? It's a tremendous amount of work. But in any event, let me stop this video here, and I'll continue with my discussions on what people do in law school, right? So today, I basically was explaining that your first year of law school, you take these courses: civil procedure, you take constitutional law, you take criminal law, criminal procedure, you take evidence, you take property or real property, and you take torts, right? You take torts, and you take contracts, right? Contracts. Okay, you don't want to leave out contracts. So those are courses that you're going to be tested on in the bar exam. After you graduate from law school, you're going to take the bar exam for whatever state you want to practice in. After you graduate, if you pass the bar, you're called to the bar. They do a character and fitness test, and then when you're called to the bar, you're now an officer of the court you take your oath, right? And then you're an officer of the court of the specific state bar that you took, right? And a reason for attorneys being licensed. So when you take the bar, you pass, and you're called to the bar, you're now an attorney. And so the reason why people take the bar exam and become a member of the bar in good standing is so that they can discipline you, because lawyers work for the public, right? So they want to make sure that lawyers are not like snake oil salesmen, charlatans that they can't discipline. So that's the important reason of being a member of a bar. That state, bodies can hold lawyers, attorneys accountable, right? They can hold them accountable, and they can punish them if they do something wrong, including disbarring them. In any event, I'll stop this video here now. My name is Oloro Timosha. I'll keep you posted. Thank you.